My name is Robert Bradford. I'm a student studying English literature at AUM, and today I want to talk to you about something that I really love, movies. In an increasingly socially distant world, I think that movies um, play an important role in, I guess, keeping sane and offering an outlet to enjoy yourself, a creative outlet, and they also offer a lot of different themes and messages that are important and can only be seen through the medium of cinema and film. Today, though, I want to talk to you about a specific genre of film. Um, it's a genre that a lot of people don't necessarily know a lot about, but they probably are familiar with a lot of films from the genre. Today, I would like to talk to you about film noir. All right. So, like I said, today I want to talk to you about film noir. Film noir is just generally a cinematic style, a genre of film that's characterized by a specific type of narrative and a specific type of stylistic characteristics that film noir employs and film noir is greatly known for. First, we will talk about a little bit of the history behind film noir. Film noir really comes to rise at the end of World War II. Post-war America is it's flush with money and capital. A lot of overproduction in the war leads a lot of people to have a lot of money, and it creates a lot of different new socioeconomic groups that need to be satisfied. And cinema directors start to build different genres of film to facilitate and satisfy these different socioeconomic groups. So, for instance, you have a lot of men that come back from the war and they left and they start families, and that's where the baby boomer generation. So you have a lot of kids growing up in the late 1940s, 1950s, and through the 1950s and the 1960s. And these teenagers, they grow up, they become very independent because there's a lot of money flowing in the economy. And these teenagers, they need an outlet. They need films to go see. A lot of the films that have been coming out before this are old school. So you're talking about like musicals, these big grandiose musicals, or the large grandiose kind of westerns. And a lot of the younger generation at the time was not fulfilled with a lot of these movies. They were emblematic of a different period of time that they were not from. So Hollywood starts to adapt and produce films and genres that are a little bit more applicable to these new socioeconomic groups that develop out of the war. One of these is film noir. Film noir is a French term that just means dark film. We're going to get into it a little bit later, but dark film is characteristic of the cinematic styles, the visual style of the medium. But so yes, in the first few years after the war, film noir spoke profoundly to the post-war frustrations, discomforts, and alienation that were brought on by a lot of these soldiers returning home from war. It utilized highly stylized visuals, and realistic plot and narrative elements that really captured kind of the zeitgeist of what was going on at the time. People were concerned about, rising crime rates. Many people were moving to the suburbs as a result of this. People were concerned about another possible world war, the spread of communism. A lot of these things kind of affect the development of film noir and the style of movie that a lot of directors are making right now. At the time, though, a very popular genre of film were the detective stories and the gangster films. Gangster films have been popular, almost, from the beginning of cinema. I mean, early films like the Great Train Robbery aren't necessarily gangster films, but they're very early crime narratives, which kind of influence gangster films, and gangster films influence film noir. So film noir kind of blends these two in a lot of different ways. They use elements of crime and use elements of detective stories. And a lot of them are based in detective novels. And some of these writers, including Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler, were originally authors. They authored detective novels such as The Big Sleep and The Maltese Falcon, two films that are really known to be emblematic of the film noir style. The authors of those novels, detective novels, actually wrote the screenplays and interacted with the directors and the cinematographers on those films to create kind of this visual styling in the world that they wanted their characters to inhabit. So from these pulp novels, that's where noir gets. So noir gets this kind of hard-boiled ambiance and world-weary pessimism. From gangster films, the genre got its characteristics shadow-laden visual style and its larger vision of intersections of capital accumulation and criminal enterprise. So like I was saying before, during this time period, you have the development of suburbs for the rising population after post-war. One of the reasons for the development of suburbs is a real genuine concern with crime and violence in the inner cities. You know, you're coming out of the 1920s and 1930s, where prohibition kind of leads into this, systemic crime problem in the inner cities, and that's what a lot of the gangster films that film noir draws on depict. And just these kind of stylized gangster and crime-filled atmosphere. So film noir is kind of a reflection on the issues of the time, utilizing those same kind of characters and archetypes. Now, one of the clearest indicators that you're watching a film noir movie is just the visual style. A lot of these films emphasize the use of really, really dark and the emphasis of what's known as chiaroscuro, which is basically just the emphasis of light and shadow. So using light and shadow to play off of each other and create these really visual, stylized visuals. These are two images from Orson Welles' Touch of Evil, a movie from the mid-1940s. One of Orson Welles' one of his first and earliest and last great films. We're going to get into the film in a second, though. So noir gets its hard-boiled ambiance from these pulp and detective novels. The genre, from gangster films, the genre gets its characters to shadow-laden visual style, which you can see in these two pieces right here. A lot of this style comes from, like I said, early gangster films, but also early German expressionist films from the 1920s. A lot of those films were set during at nighttime, but pre-1940s, when you're shooting movies at night, or when you're shooting movies that are set at nighttime, when you're actually shooting movies in the daytime and using a camera filter, a lens filter over your camera to kind of give you this nighttime appearance. Developments in film and cinematography allowed for directors in the 1940s to actually shoot at night to give a just incredibly realistic depiction of the night, which is where a lot of these crime and violent narratives are happening. So here in these two images from Touch of Evil that we're looking at, this is a really early example of what's known as like a continuous shot. So sorry about that. This is what's known as a continuous shot. So the shot of this scene is the opening of the film, and you see the car in the center of this frame here. The camera pans above the car and actually follows it around the street, and the whole scene takes place in about maybe 2 minutes, but it's one continuous shot, the same angle the entire time, and it really becomes a profound and very memorable style, characteristic of film noir. A lot of directors utilize this continuous shot. So far, a lot of directors nowadays use it, and they film entire movies with continuous non-breaking shots. So it stems from the genre of film noir. Touch of Evil also also is a really great movie. Like I said, probably one of the worst things I was probably his last great film. A lot of the elements that he was depicting here were actually cut afterwards by the studio production code, just because they wanted to cut for time and cut for censorship. And so the movie that he originally shot and filmed isn't necessarily what was originally released at the time, but I think now you can get a cut of the film that is the exact reproduction of what he made. So film noir is actually film noir also is characteristic of its narrative style and the characteristics of the narrative kind of stories like that it tells. Like I said, a lot of the narratives are focused on crime and violence in the inner cities, but they generally kind of center around either like this detective archetype or this kind of world-weary man archetype. It's just a placeholder for the world-weary veteran straight back from the post-war. So a lot of these noir films are rooted in the fundamental social changes that troubled many Americans, specifically men, after the Second World War. The pessimism, longing, and sense of loss and insecurity that reside at the heart of film noir convey the crisis of adjustment experienced by many American men after the war. So a lot of authors at the time go into this kind of sense of disillusionment of American men after World War I and World War II. They come back with and are the horrors of war have kind of disillusioned them to these aspects of society that we normally take for granted. A lot of the narratives center around, a man and a character that we're going to get into a little bit later called the femme fatale, and they will, focus on the interactions between the protagonist and the femme fatale. A lot of noir films pivot on a reckless moment, a single bad decision that changes our characters' lives irrevocably. Most noir narratives concern crime and punishment, like I said, but they do some of the complexity that was seldom seen before on screen. Noir films are about characters embarking on a criminal adventure and murder for profit, for example, and double indemnity. The screenshot here is from a movie called Sunset Boulevard, made in 1950, I believe, 1950 or 1954, and it is another prime example of film noir. It has all the visual stylings and the narrative characteristics. This is a very good example of a visual styling of a kind of a camera angle that is off key or off kilter. And it also shows, kind of the sexualized nature of some of these film noirs, and the interaction between the, kind of male antagonist or protagonist detective and the femme fatale. And a lot of the film noirs, the male hero must sacrifice his life in order to stop an evil woman. In Sunset Boulevard, it is this female character right here, Norma Desmond, an aging film actress who kind of adopts the man next to her, Joe Gillis, as a screenwriter for her next big break movie. She's an Asian actress, but she's trying to get back into the industry, so she hires her own personal screenwriter, and she kind of manipulates him and kind of forms him into the man she wants him to be. But the whole while, he's just losing himself in the process, and he's becoming more and more conflicted. One of the big narrative tropes of film noir are actually narrated stories. So stories where a character in the film will narrate what is going on. Sunset Boulevard is one of those films where Joe Gillis actually narrates the entire thing, or a lot of different aspects of the film. Yeah, exactly. So use of narration, Billy Wilder's Sunset Boulevard is narrated by the screenwriter lying dead face down in a swimming pool. Double Indemnity, another great film noir, which involves a insurance salesman and a woman who is trying to plan the murder of her husband. She is helped by this insurance salesman to murder her husband and gain the insurance money for it. Also, another kind of example of the interplay between characters in film noir, all focusing around a crime or a narrative of crime. A lot of the male protagonists, though, in these films, they always end up dying either by fault of their own or due to interactions with women. Um, those women are represented as the femme fatale, the term that you probably have heard of before, but may not know where it comes from. It actually comes from film noir. Femme fatales are these archetypal female characters that that kind of bring the downfall of men in film noir movies. Um, you know, you can take that how you will, but obviously times were different in the day. So at the center of many of these noir films is a devouring woman, a femme fatale. The noir femme fatale seems in retrospect like a nightmarish version of the economically and sexually emancipated woman of the post-war period. So during the war, obviously all the men go off to fight and all the women go off to work in factories and they gain factory paying jobs to aid in the war effort. But at the same time, America kind of discovers a brand new workforce. All of these women who have traditionally not worked jobs are now producing and adding to the economy. And the women are creating this kind of new socioeconomic class that is kind of adds the disillusionment of the American men when they come back from the war, because now women have gained a sort of financial independence where they can live independently of a man and not have to necessarily rely on them. So it creates this kind of world of confusion that these men aren't used to, and it scares them, and it's reflected in the style of movies that they make. So femme fatales are seen as these kind of like sexually promiscuous, independent women who generally cause the downfall of the antagonist. So it's really a kind of a American men kind of scared reflection on the independence of women at the time. The femme fatales are portrayed as inevitably beautiful, sexually promiscuous, and willing to protect themselves and their freedom at all costs. When sex is no longer effective and necessary, then more women like male heroes and other genres reaches freedom. So, as we're talking about Sunset Boulevard, just in the last slide, this is Norma Desmond again. At the end of Sunset Boulevard, Norma is, her main goal is just to have her stardom light come back into cinema. And so she's going to do anything that she has to get that. And she ends up killing Joe Gillis because he stands in her way. Very interesting ending. She does that and she kills Joe Gillis because he's standing in her way of stardom. In Double Indemnity, a little bit simpler of a narrative. Phyllis Dietrichson, the husband of Mr. Dietrichson, and the woman who enlists the help of an insurance agent to help her plan her husband's murder and profit off the insurance money. She plots with this insurance agent, and then in the end, she kind of plots to have him killed as well to gain all the share of the insurance money. So another representation of the independent woman being the downfall of the man. Noir women are astonishingly pragmatic about sex, whereas their men give in to passion and obsession and thus find ruin for the noir femme fatale. As for the vamp and the silent melodrama, sex is merely a means to an end. Double Indemnity opens with a telling reflective voiceover delivered by the film's central male character, the insurance agent Walter Neff. Neff says, "I killed him for the money, and for a woman, I didn't get the money, and I didn't get the woman." Yes, unfortunately, Walter Neff, he's misused by Phyllis Dietrichson, and he ends up dying because of it. He receives no financial compensation, and Dietrichson leaves him. So that was kind of a brief history of noir and some of the major films of the 1940s. But noir films are still, happening. They're still contemporary. Not only in like the directors and films that they inspire, but in films that are coming out right now. So this is kind of a breakdown of just a very small sample of films and directors that were inspired by film noir. So so film noir kind of ends. It goes from, the late 1930s all the way up until, probably the middle of the 1960s is true genuine film noir. So in 1976, you have Taxi Driver, Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver, which is, categorized as a neo-noir film because it really draws on the visual styles and characteristics of film noir, but also around a crime narrative. Taxi Driver is a very realistically aggressive and violent film. Quentin Tarantino is an acclaimed director and also very famous for his influences in the older genre like blaxploitation and film noir. Pulp Fiction, his 1994 film, is highly inspired by film noir in visual style and narrative. In 1999, you have Fight Club, which is another criminal narrative. 2005, you have a really great neo-noir film called Brick by director Ron Johnson, who just directed the last Stars movie. So yes, film noir directors are alive and well, and it's just a really good reinterpretation of classic film noir, of the classic film noir story, a detective narrative featuring all the character archetypes of femme fatale, a detective, a brain, a milk toast man, and then 2011's Drive with Ryan Gosling, another very highly visualized and stylized feature film that uses characteristics of film noir, and also has a focus on a crime narrative, a seedy underworld, this kind of disillusioned male protagonist, a femme fatale, who kind of instigates and causes a lot of trouble for these people. So just by the brief selection of films, you can see that film noir is it's alive and it's well, and it inspires a lot of directors and movies to this day. So hopefully, what you've taken away from this is that film genres that developed 60, 70, 80 years ago still are relevant to this day, and they affect the films that we see all the time. Just as those film noir with a commentary on the socioeconomic status of 1940s America, the directors that utilize film noir styles and characteristics now use it to comment on the socioeconomic status of America now, which is why you're seeing a resurgence in film noir, because some of the social conditions are not the same but similar. So hopefully you'll be able to recognize a few characteristics of this in some movies that you watch on your own. Maybe you've seen some of these films and haven't realized the influences that film noir has had on them. So hope this is